In 1993, an American soldier named Eugene Powley suffered a brain infection that destroyed a key area responsible for short-term memory. This meant that he couldn't remember what he had done just moments before. He didn't know people's names, and he couldn't even remember the way to the bathroom inside his own home. But the astonishing part, despite his memory loss, he would get up every morning, walk to the kitchen, open the fridge, prepare his breakfast, and return to his place as if nothing had changed. He would even go out every day for a walk around the neighborhood and come back without getting lost, though if you asked him, "Where is your house?" he wouldn't know the answer. That's when scientists began asking a serious question. If Eugene doesn't remember what he's doing, then who is doing it? This is how Charles Duhigg began his journey to explore the most automatic, hidden, and deep human behavior: habit. A habit is something we do unconsciously, yet it determines the outcomes of our entire life. It's what makes you get up or be lazy, move forward or stay stuck, save or consume, grow or keep repeating. A habit is not just what we do, it is who we are. And here the author reveals the secret, that habit is not fate, nor merely a genetic tendency or biological reaction. Rather, it is a programmed system, one that can be dismantled, understood, and then reshaped. In other words, if you understand how a habit is formed, you can change almost anything: your behavior, your health, your productivity, your finances, even your destiny. Charles Duhigg says that every habit goes through 3 clear stages that resemble a closed loop. Cue, something internal or external that triggers the behavior. Routine, the automatic reaction you do. Reward, what makes you repeat the action. And this loop repeats silently in the background until it becomes your daily reality. But what you might not know is that you can break the loop, or reprogram it. Yes, you can keep the cue and the reward, but change the routine. And with that, the process of change begins from the inside, not through force, but through understanding and control. The book doesn't talk about habits just on a personal level, it goes deeper. How are corporate habits formed? How did political paths change because of a habit no one noticed? And in every story, Charles Duhigg leads you to one question: do you own your habits, or do they own you? Therefore, if you want to change your future, don't start with willpower, start with understanding. Understand the habit, dismantle it, then reshape it as you wish. This book, simply put, gives you the operating manual of your daily brain. So, are you now ready to dive into the first loop of this system, where everything begins with a small cue that turns into a habit that shapes your destiny? Now we begin the first part of this valuable book, where Charles Duhigg breaks down for us one of the strongest keys that controlled human behavior: the habit loop. Imagine that you enter a room one morning and you smell the scent of fresh coffee. At that very moment, you find your feet moving automatically toward the coffee machine, without thinking, without deciding, without even realizing that you've already started the action. This is what Charles Duhigg calls the power of the loop. Not just because you love coffee, but because your brain has learned that scent equals reward, and that there is an automatic behavior that repeats in the middle. A habit, simply, is nothing more than a loop made of 3 parts. Cue. It's the trigger, the first spark, the thing that tells your brain it's time for a certain action. It can be a specific time, a place, a feeling, or even a person. For example, waking up equals desire to check the phone. Routine. It's the actual behavior you perform in response to the cue. And this is the heart of the habit, what gets repeated every time. For example, opening a specific app, smoking, eating, thinking negatively, or even doing a workout. Reward. It's what your brain seeks, the feeling of comfort, euphoria, control, or satisfaction. The reward is what solidifies the behavior in the brain. For example, the pleasure of caffeine, or the sense of reassurance after checking notifications. And the real magic happens here, that the more the loop repeats, the stronger it becomes, deeper and more automatic, until the brain turns into autopilot. And within this autopilot lies both the problem and the opportunity, because the brain, by its nature, loves to convert behaviors into habits in order to save energy. It doesn't want to think about everything every day. It programs you to repeat your previous behavior, especially if it was followed by a good feeling. But here's the surprise. Habits cannot be erased, but they can be replaced. Meaning, you can't just remove a bad habit as if it never existed, but you can keep the cue and the reward and only change the routine. For example, if you eat excessively when you're bored, then the cue, boredom, and the reward, comfort, remain the same. But you can replace eating with a brisk walk, or writing, or a motivating phone call. And after a while, the brain starts to reinforce the new behavior as a replacement habit. It's not a matter of willpower, it's a matter of understanding. And this is what makes this discovery so important, that your habits are breakable, analyzable, and rebuildable, if only you have awareness and connect each loop to its source. Think about your life now. What behaviors are being repeated? What are their cues? And what reward is your brain seeking behind each habit? And what if you only replaced the routine and changed the whole destiny? Do you dare to start from here, from dismantling the first loop in your mind, so we can then build what will become your new system?
Wonderful! We continue our journey into the depths of the book, The Power of Habit. And now we move to something deeper than merely understanding how a habit works. We go into why we desire it in the first place, and why some habits turn into an almost automatic addiction that awakens emotions within us that we cannot resist. All of this begins when your brain shifts into an automatic state of alertness, a state known in neuroscience as craving or internal ignition. So let's begin the story, as we're used to, from where the mind doesn't expect it. Imagine you're walking down the street and suddenly smell fresh pastries, just like the ones your grandmother used to make during your childhood. In a single moment, without any thinking, you find your mouth watering, your steps shifting, and you head toward the bakery, perhaps even buying a piece, although you weren't even hungry to begin with. What happened was not a conscious decision, but the result of something deeper. Your brain craved the reward before it happened. And here Charles Duhigg reveals the big secret, that a habit doesn't begin only with a cue, but with an internal expectation of the reward. Meaning, your brain doesn't wait to receive the pleasure, it expects it and begins to crave it as soon as the cue appears. This is what transforms a habit from a repeated behavior into a psychological addiction. In neuroscience studies, it was found that in the brains of people who had learned a certain habit, the brain's reward centers start to activate the moment the cue appears, even before the action takes place. Meaning, a person who's used to drinking coffee at 9 a.m. feels a sense of euphoria just from looking at the coffee cup. An athlete who's used to running in the evening feels physical excitement just by putting on their running shoes. And a smoker starts feeling relaxed just by seeing the cigarette pack, even before lighting it. It's not the action that triggers the desire, but the programmed imagination that precedes the action. And this is what makes the habit so powerful, because it feeds itself through craving, not the action itself. But the good news, this very same system can work in your favor. Yes, you can train your brain to crave positive things, to crave exercise or meditation or writing or working or learning, as long as you link it to a clear, expected, and satisfying reward. Here we reach the turning point. The more you desire a certain reward, the more likely you are to stick to the behavior associated with it. That is, craving is the fuel, and the habit is the machine. And here lies the power of changing habits. Don't just try to force yourself into a good habit, rather create a new desire around it. Link it to a feeling, an image, a reward, or a goal that excites you. And then your brain will begin shifting automatically from hesitation to craving. This way, change becomes not an external obligation, but an internal need. A need your brain can't escape from because it's now expecting the reward and demanding it. So ask yourself now, what habit do you want to build? And what reward can ignite your craving for it? Because what you long for is what you will do. So will you reprogram your brain to crave your future? Let's continue the journey toward building that future, habit by habit.
We now arrive at one of the most important secrets of real change revealed by the power of habit. The secret considered the golden key to breaking free from our old habits and freeing ourselves from them without ongoing struggle. The secret is not to fight your bad habit, but to replace it. And here, Charles Duhigg presents what he calls the golden rule of habit change. In the early 20th century, it was believed that habits stemmed from personality, willpower, or perhaps genetics. But when neuroscience research began to reveal the mechanism of this strange loop, from cue to routine to reward, a more exciting question emerged. If the habit is built on a loop, can we simply change the routine and keep the cue and reward as they are? The answer that science revealed was yes. And from here was born what is known as the golden rule. Imagine a person who is used to eating sweets after lunch every day. He says he can't focus unless he has a piece of chocolate, and that he's a sugar addict. But when he analyzed his behavior, he discovered that the cue was 3 p.m. and the reward wasn't the sweets themselves, but rather a short break or a moment of social interaction with colleagues. So what happens if the cue stays the same and the reward stays the same, but the routine changes from eating sweets to chatting with a colleague, or taking a short walk, or even drinking a cup of tea without sugar? Over time, the brain begins to reinforce the new behavior, because it doesn't care about the means, it cares about the result, the reward. And this is the essence of the golden rule. Don't delete the habit, replace it. Don't try to stop yourself from smoking by force.
Rather, let the same cue, stress or loneliness, lead to an alternative behavior, deep breathing, chewing gum, or a quick meditation. Don't try to kill the habit of checking your phone before bed. Instead, replace it with reading something light or writing down your thoughts, provided it gives you the same feeling: comfort, disconnection from reality, or closing out the day. The brain doesn't resist habits, it resists their absence. But when you give it a satisfying alternative, it will adopt it. But there is one simple, crucial condition. To make the golden rule work, you must believe in the possibility of change. Because if you perform the new behavior while not believing it will succeed, your brain will cling to the old one and see the new as just a passing experiment. Belief is not just a feeling, it's an inner ignition that makes your mind ready to shift. And many studies, especially in support groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, have proven that the people who managed to break destructive habits were those who believed they could build a new identity, and that what they were doing wasn't just a temporary imitation, but a new beginning. Therefore, the golden rule changes your life only when it's paired with awareness that you clearly recognize your cue and reward. Alternative, that you choose another behavior that satisfies the same need. Belief, that you believe this transformation is your new identity. And so, don't fight your habit, don't curse it, don't regret it. Understand it and change its path. It's like a stream of water. It doesn't need to be blocked, just redirected. So what habit will you change the course of today? And what new behavior will you plant in place of the old one? The choice isn't in tomorrow, it's in the very next moment after the cue.
Now we move on to the second part of this valuable book, where Charles Duhigg broadens the lens of vision. After we understood how a habit works within the individual, now it's time to discover how just one habit can change the fate of an entire company. This is not an exaggeration, but what is known as the keystone habit. A central habit. When it changes, it creates a cumulative effect that reshapes culture, behavior, and outcomes. Let us dive into this concept as we're used to, through a real story, deep analysis, and direct practical inspiration. In the 1990s, the American aluminium company Alcoa was going through a troubled period. Productivity was weak. Industrial accidents were numerous, employees were uncommitted, and the stock was plummeting. When a new CEO named Paul O'Neill was appointed, everyone expected him to talk about profits, cost-cutting, and growth strategies. But his first public speech was shocking. He said with confidence, "The number one goal during my tenure is industrial safety. We will not tolerate any workplace injury." People were stunned. Safety? Is that what you're going to bet on? But Paul knew something that wasn't clear to others. He had chosen a keystone habit. He realized that improving safety meant changing the culture of discipline, improving communication between workers and management, updating processes, eliminating chaos and waste, and stimulating a sense of belonging. And indeed, the company began recording the lowest accident rates in the industry, followed by improvements in quality, efficiency, production, then in profits, until the company's value doubled within a few years. All of that began with one habit. And here Charles Duhigg reveals the golden lesson. Not all habits are equal. There are habits which, if changed, everything else changes with them. These are the keystone habits. and they are not necessarily tied to a direct result, but they produce enormous indirect outcomes. Another example, in the lives of individuals. People who commit to exercising regularly often begin to also eat healthier, sleep more consistently, reduce random spending, even strengthen their personal relationships. The reason? This habit changes the person's identity at a deep level. It makes them feel like someone disciplined, capable, aware, and deserving of better. And this feeling begins to seep into other areas of their life. And so, the keystone habit becomes the first domino, which, when it falls, knocks over all the other frozen pieces. But how do we identify our keystone habit? Ask yourself, what small behavior, if I committed to it sincerely, would change the way I see myself? What habit reflects the values I want to instill? What action, if I succeeded in it, would give me the confidence to develop other habits? There is no single answer for everyone. What is keystone for you may not be for someone else. But this remains constant. If you want real change, don't start by trying to change 10 things. Start with one smart habit that touches the heart and reshapes behavior from within. That way, change won't be temporary, but sequential, expanding, and constructive. So, what is your keystone habit? The one that will redefine you and move you toward a new version of yourself? The answer may be simpler than you expect.
Wonderful! We now continue the second part of The Power of Habit, this time through an inspiring story that proves success in professional life does not depend solely on skill or intelligence, but on something deeper, something that can be trained like a muscle: willpower. And to explain how successful habits form in organizations, Charles Duhigg chose a real-life example from everyday life, a company we all know, Starbucks. But the story isn't about coffee. It's about how a successful personality is built inside the workplace through what are called willpower habits. Let us tell it as usual, with depth, analysis, and inspiration. Travis was a young man who grew up in an environment full of violence, absence, and family breakdowns. At school, he lacked the ability to focus and was quick-tempered. But one day, he walked into a Starbucks branch and started working there. And within a few short years, this young man transformed from someone undisciplined into a model of calmness, patience, and steadiness under pressure. What changed? Was it the coffee? The money? None of that. What changed was that they taught him a new habit, a habit called pre-programmed response. At Starbucks, employees are not only trained on how to prepare coffee, they are trained on how to control their emotions in difficult situations. How? Through what is known in habit science as implementation plans or if-then plans. That is, the employee practices scenarios in advance, such as, if a customer yells at me, I will smile and say XYZ. If I feel stressed, I will take a deep breath and ask for help from colleagues. This simple plan pre-programs their response, turning impulsive anger into a calm routine and returning control to the conscious mind. And after repeating it dozens of times, it's no longer just a reaction. It becomes a habit. Here, Charles Duhigg reveals a very profound point. Willpower is not a talent, it's a habit. Yes, you can become more self-controlled if you repeat a certain behavior in the face of the same trigger.
And the more you practice it, the more your willpower muscle grows. You become less distracted, less explosive, and more confident. Studies have found that people with high willpower are not necessarily stronger than others, but they've simply built an environment with fewer surrender moments, and they'd prepared themselves in advance for pressure. At Starbucks, this habit turned into a culture. Calmness is not an option. It is a system that is trained, reinforced, and rewarded. And thus the organization churned into a small factory for manufacturing internal success. And the most important lesson here: don't wait to have willpower automatically. Train yourself on how to respond before the pressure comes. Set a clear plan for every recurring situation. If I feel exhausted, I will do XYZ. If I lose focus, I will start with XYZ. If I feel fear, I will breathe and think before I act. Each repetition of these plans adds a new brick to building your internal habit of success. And in this way, you begin to transform, not just through results, but through how you face yourself and the world at the first sign of pressure. So will you write your next plan? Because the next habit may be the difference between the one who explodes and the one who overcomes.
We now arrive at one of the most exciting and profound chapters in The Power of Habit, a chapter that shows you how a crisis becomes a hidden blessing, and how radical change, which may seem impossible in normal times, becomes possible, even inevitable, when shock strikes. Charles Duhigg calls this phenomenon the power of crisis, and his story about the company Alcoa is not just about the aluminum industry, but about how a single leader, in the midst of crisis, can completely reshape institutional habits. When Paul O'Neill took over as CEO of Alcoa, the company was in a spiral of chaos. Continuous losses, declining production, falling morale, repeated accidents, and a complete lack of trust between management and employees. Everyone expected him to start with traditional measures: cutting the workforce, reducing costs, seeking investments. But he shocked them with an unusual move. He focused on one thing only: industrial safety. Yes, he said it clearly: we will not succeed unless safety becomes the #1 habit in this company. And here the crisis began to work in his favor. In an environment filled with anxiety and fear of collapse, he was able to pass a completely new habit without resistance. Why? Because a crisis disables psychological defenses. In normal times, minds resist change, even if it's beneficial. But in crisis, the routine of normality collapses, and people begin to become open to renewal. And this is what O'Neill did with brilliant precision. He didn't cut employees. Instead, he raised their self-confidence by involving them in the safety plan. He didn't change everything at once. Instead, he changed one keystone habit that impacted everything. He didn't just talk about safety. He made every management decision measured by how much it served safety. The result? Attacks dropped tremendously. Efficiency improved because systems became clearer and more disciplined. Belonging increased because every worker felt their life mattered. And most importantly, financial results began to improve, even without directly focusing on them. But there was something even more striking. When a real crisis occurred in one of the company's branches, a fatal accident, O'Neill used it to prove that safety was not just a slogan, but an identity. He fired the responsible parties, disclosed the details to the press, and refused to make excuses. In that moment,
every employee realized that things had truly changed, that this company was no longer being run as it had been, and that the old habit of evading responsibility had died. From there, a new culture began to be born. And here the book reveals one of its deepest lessons. A crisis is not just a danger, but a window for profound change. During crises, people become more willing to accept the new. True leaders emerge. Old habits weaken, making way for the birth of better ones. But more important than the crisis itself is how you use it. Does it freeze you or liberate you? Does it drag you back to old habits or implore onto you changing directions? In the end, every organization, every team, every individual goes through crises. But the successful ones are those who understand that every crisis is an opportunity to reprogram collective behavior. So what habit might be deeply rooted in your organization or in your life and just needs a small crisis or a big awareness to be broken down and replaced? Perhaps you're now at the heart of a transformation. So, will you choose to be born again?
We now arrive at a chapter that reveals one of the smartest and most dangerous uses of habits in the modern age, a chapter that goes beyond individuals and organizations and takes us into the world of major corporations, which not only change your habits, but learn from them, predict them, and exploit them to steer you without you even noticing. In this chapter of The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg reveals how the company Target, a massive American retail chain, didn't settle for simply selling products, but began to study consumer habits to know what you want before you know it yourself. Imagine walking into a store, and before you say a word, you find the ads, promotions, products, even the layouts of the aisles, all designed as if they know you. It's not a coincidence. At Target, the marketing department began analyzing the behavior of thousands of customers through debit card data, purchase records, shopping times, and price logs. Then, one analyst discovered something astonishing. Pregnant women change their purchasing habits gradually at specific stages of pregnancy. How? In early pregnancy, they start buying vitamins and minerals, then later move on to unscented skin creams, and suddenly they begin picking up baby products, even before telling anyone that they're pregnant. And what Target did was simple. They analyzed these patterns, then built a mathematical model that could predict pregnancy only by changes in purchase behavior. And the company began, without customers knowing, to send coupons and personalized offers to women who were likely pregnant. It wasn't long before a furious father received an ad targeted at his teenage daughter containing newborn baby products. They had revealed a secret that even the family didn't know yet. At this point, Duhigg pauses and asks a profound question. Are we truly free in our consumer decisions, or are our recorded and monitored habits leading us unconsciously? What Target did was not an exception. It is an example of how companies exploit collective habits, those small, recurring patterns, to predict behavior, adjust their offers, and nudge you toward a decision you weren't intending to make. But there's another side, not entirely negative. Because if companies can predict what we want based on our habits, this also means our habits leave a measurable trace, and that we too can, if we become aware, change them and break free. Here emerges the hidden power of collective habits, because they repeat themselves within neighborhoods, institutions, families, and societies. Changing them sometimes requires just one strategic intervention point to adjust an entire chain of behavior.
Changing the cues, or product arrangement, or ad design, or timing of the incentive. These are all small details, but they may reprogram the routines of millions of people. But the danger lies in the fact that this power is sometimes used against you, not for you. If you are not aware of your habits, don't understand your cues, and don't know what triggers you, then you become the product, and you are the one being controlled. Here comes the tough question. Are you the one who owns your behavior? Or are others using the data from your habits to guide you from behind the curtain? The answer begins with your awareness, with your understanding of the habit loop within your daily life, and with your ability to say yes or no from your own will, not from your programming. So, what is the habit that owns you without your knowledge? And what simple change could restore your control? Perhaps your journey began with a personal habit, but now you stand before habits that control your entire world.
Wonderful! We now reach the final section of the book, The Power of Habit. The section that takes us from the circles of the individual and the organization to the greater impact, the habits that change societies and launch movements that reshape history. But the question is, do major social transformations consist only of slogans, anger, or inspiration? Or is there, behind every revolution, a habit? Charles Duhigg answers powerfully. Every social movement starts with a habit, continues through a habit, and succeeds when it becomes a habit. Let's examine this through two real-life stories. Story 1, the Montgomery bus boycott. In the 1950s, racism was deeply rooted in America. It was normal for black Americans to be forced to sit at the back of buses and be expelled if they refused. Then came a moment of defiance that was not ordinary. Rosa Parks, a simple, respectable woman, not a political activist, refused to give her seat to a white man. But why did this incident spark the boycott? Many had preceded her in similar acts. The answer lies in the power of unseen social habits. Rosa Parks was part of a large, interwoven social network, a teacher, a quiet activist, known by churches, women's groups, and local communities. And when she was arrested, her network moved automatically. Everyone in her circle felt that what happened to her could happen to them. The habit began. Letters were sent. Meetings were held. Boycott calls spread. Not through a big organization, but through pre-existing social relationships. Then Martin Luther King Jr. came to adopt the voice, unify the message, and turn the personal habit into a collective identity. And so the boycott lasted for over a year until the unjust habit was broken by a new one, daily boycott. And this is the secret the book reveals. Revolutions do not succeed only because of anger, but because they are built on strong relationships and then generalized into a collective culture. Story 2, Saddleback Church. In the 1980s, Pastor Rick Warren started a new church in California, but instead of relying solely on preaching, he built the church on a completely different idea. Make people's daily habits interact with the spiritual message. How? Well, every new person joins a small group. Every group has a schedule, a weekly meeting habit, a shared activity, a simple exchange, and the church becomes not just a place of worship, but a behavioral environment that reshapes people's lives step by step. Richard didn't change people's hearts directly. He changed their daily collective behavior,
Then that behavior began to change their thinking, then their faith, then their identity. And in a few years, the church became one of the largest religious movements in America. And here Duhigg offers the most important conclusion of this chapter. Movements don't last if they rely only on charisma. They must be built within people's daily habits. In other words, you can't build real change through passionate slogans alone. You must create a simple daily routine shared by individuals, repeated consistently, until it becomes a custom. And thus, the movement transitions from being an event to becoming a way of life. Now the most important question is for you. What idea do you believe in? Can it be turned into a simple daily habit in your life or community? Who is the first person you can link to a habit that will change their perspective and behavior? Because the next movement always starts from one person, then a relationship, then a habit. And history is not written only with words, but with behavior that repeats until it changes the collective consciousness entirely.
We now arrive at the conclusion of the power of habit, but it's not a conclusion in the ordinary sense. It's a chapter in which Charles Duhigg challenges deep philosophical and ethical foundations. Is a person truly responsible for their actions? Can we blame someone for a habit if it lies deeper than their awareness? And what determines when a habit is a free choice and when it becomes a constraint too strong for willpower? In this chapter, the author doesn't merely explain, he takes us to the heart of the debate between willpower, the brain, and habit, using real-life cases that stand at the edge between law and science, between ethics and neurology. The first story begins with a man named Brian Thomas, an ordinary man, loving husband, with no criminal record or aggression. But one summer night, he woke up to find he had strangled his wife to death. The shocking part, he wasn't conscious of what he had done. He suffered from a disorder called sleep terror, a condition in which a person enters a state similar to wakefulness, but is unaware of their behavior. He had thought he was defending himself from an intruder who didn't exist. He was put on trial, and the central question was this act a crime or a neurological habit beyond his control? In the end, he was acquitted because the court was convinced he had no awareness of his actions. But there is another story, a completely different one, that shows the complexity of this debate. A man named Angelo Mosillo suffered from gambling addiction. He lost his money, his relationships, his self-confidence. And despite being fully aware of what he was doing, he couldn't stop. He said, "Every time I promise myself I won't go back, and then I do." In court, his defense tried to prove that his addiction was beyond his will, but the judge rejected this argument and said, "A habit may be strong, but you still choose each time to surrender to it." And here the book reveals the truth's complexity. Not all habits are the same. Not all cases deserve blame, but neither do they all deserve justification. And here is Charles Duhigg offers his essential insight. A habit doesn't cancel willpower, but it weakens it if you're not aware. The brain may build powerful neural pathways that repeat the same behavior again and again. But in every habit, there is a decisive moment. A moment of choice. It doesn't last long, but it's always there. A moment when you can say no, to stop the loop, to change the outcome. And the difficult question is, will you take responsibility for your habit, even if you didn't create it, even if it's deeper than your awareness? Because change begins when you say, maybe I didn't choose the beginning, but I will choose the ending. In every habit, there are cues and cravings wrapped in repetition,
But between the cue and the response, there's a tiny space, and in that space, a person can be born again. That is the essence of willpower. And now the choice is in your hands, to see your habits as chains that restrain you, or as maps that guide you, if you learn to read them. Because the power of habit, in the end, isn't in how it controls you, but in your ability to control it once you decide to take the lead.
Great. We now arrive at the practical conclusion of The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, the path that ties together everything we've read and presents it as a direct, actionable guide. No slogans, no theorizing, just real steps you can begin today. After the book revealed to us how habits are formed, how they function, and how they evolve from simple actions to personal and social systems, it's time to answer the question the reader inevitably asks at the end. So, what now? How do I begin? How do I change just one habit so that my life changes? Here, Duhigg offers what resembles a habit rule book. Not a magical formula, but a simple and effective framework. Let's explain each step, as we've done throughout, through storytelling, application, motivation, and a message directed at you. The golden rule. Every habit is made of 3 loops. Cue, the moment, state, or feeling that triggers the habit. Example, waking up, stress, 8 p.m., seeing your phone. Routine, the actual behavior you perform, whether simple or complex. Example, drinking coffee, emotional eating, strolling social media, smoking. And reward is what you receive after the behavior, relief, pleasure, distraction, emotional connection. And what a habit does is it automatically links these 3. If you want to break it or reshape it, you need to start right there. How do you change a habit? Step 1. Observe yourself and identify the cue. What triggers your behavior? Is it a specific time, a place, a feeling, a person, a certain event? Start noting the moment the behavior repeatedly occurs. Step 2. Break down the routine. What is the action you keep repeating? Is it a response to stress, boredom, escaping a bigger task? Be honest in describing it and ask yourself, what am I trying to feel through this behavior? Step 3. Understand the reward. What do I get from this behavior? Is it comfort, a sense of control, love, connection? Is there another reward that can give me the same feeling? Step 4. Design a replacement habit. You can't eliminate a habit, but you can replace the routine inside the same loop. Meaning, when the cue appears, do something new that gives you a similar reward. Practical example: cue, stress at work; routine, eating sweets; reward, a quick sense of comfort. To a replacement: when stressed, step out for 5 minutes, do deep breathing or a quick workout, so your brain starts linking stress to a healthy habit, not a destructive one. The rule of continuity. Patience plus conscious repetition. You don't change a habit in a day, but every time you replace the old behavior, you lay a new brick in a different neural path. And with repetition, the new path becomes stronger until it overtakes the old one. Change isn't a battle with yourself. It's simple, consistent repetition that wins over time. Collective change. Habits grow stronger when shared. So find a change partner, or join a supportive group, or simply share your intention with others, because public commitment strengthens your willpower. Start small, but stay consistent.
Don't try to change your whole life at once. Choose just one habit. Write it down. Plan it. Repeat it. And once it becomes part of you, it will light the path for other habits. And in the end, the most important message from Charles Duhigg is, you are not the sum of your random decisions. You are the sum of your repeated habits. And because you choose those habits, you can begin writing a new story for yourself, one habit at a time. Start now, because the strongest habits begin with a moment of awareness.
Every great mind starts with a single page, and you've just turned one. If this chapter's moved you, imagine what's coming next. Subscribe, hit the bell, and unlock the next idea. Keep listening, keep growing.